perfect to talk about the topic for today. So, as you've read the modules and in your text about Baha'i and religion, and you've heard a little bit about Baha'i religion from Zabina, who will have a second, we'll talk here in just a second about what's going on with the Unity Museum. And essentially, you know that Baha'i religion started in Iran. It started off as an offshoot from Islam, like we talked about last week, but now is its own religion and the fastest growing in the world. But what we're going to talk about today is the obstacles for Baha'is to get an education. And I find this topic extremely important for today's discussion of human rights, overall across the world, it's discussion for human rights, because I think it hits close to home, because in higher education here in America, where there's so much talk going on about wanting higher education to be free and or more available. But we still got placed in this world where people are denied basic education just on the grounds of their religion. So we're going to talk about that. So it's a really exciting topic. I'm really looking forward to hearing what Dr. Sabet has to say. Before we dive in, do you want to talk about the Unity Museum really quick? What's going on?
I'm sorry, Christina, you faded out a little bit. What did you say?
Do you want to talk about the Unity Museum really quick and what's going on? Like you had
brief introduction. Yeah. So I'm sorry, Christina. Yes. Well, first of all, we want to thank everybody for allowing us to come into your home and into your screen for sure. This is being sponsored by the Uniting Hearts Academy and the Unity Museum. We are on the app, as you know, and we are excited to truly have very high quality faculty members from around the country, if not from around the world, giving their insights. And the denial of education, really in anybody's faith, in this case specifically for the Baha'is, it's just abhorrent, and we just can't imagine. So we very often like to bring this to your attention, because here we have the freedom of education. We can just get into our screens, and it's just amazing what we're able to learn and to study. Whereas in some countries, certain members of certain faiths are denied that freedom. And that is what we're going to talk about. So I want to thank you, Christina, for allowing us to be in your classroom. I will mute my microphone. I will watch the chat, and I will take down my camera so not to distract anybody. So thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Sabet, for giving us really so most generously of your time, and look forward to listen to you.
Thank you, Zabina. So again, thanks to the Unity Museum and Zabina for organizing these amazing speakers. And Dr. Sabet, thank you so much for coming in. We're really excited to hear your talk. And I believe you're in Kentucky, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you are 3 hours ahead of our students here in Seattle, the Seattle area. And so thank you for staying up late so much for having this conversation. So as your talk progresses, the students will undoubtedly have some really great questions. This is a really inquisitive and intellectually curious group, and I have no doubt they're going to have some really good questions. What I'll do, if you're okay with it, is as they type their questions into the chat box, I'll speak up and read them to you. Does that sound good?
That's perfect.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to you. Dr. Sabet, thank you so much for coming. We can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for inviting me, and I really highly appreciate this opportunity to discuss the situation of Baha'i students in Iran. I had a PowerPoint that, as you can see, this is a part of a presentation that I gave to NAFSA annual conference in 2013. Of course, I have had many other PowerPoint presentations on BIHE, but this is the one that I found tonight. So anyway, but basically the idea is the same, and I'm eagerly looking forward to receiving your questions, because really the value of these online discussions and dialogue is to interact with each other, and I'm really looking forward to see how do you see the situation. And so basically, I am from Iran, and but I've been in the United States for more than 35 years, and I got my education here, and I have taught at different universities, and I'm also an international speaker and researcher. I have a website that I may introduce to you later on the situation of the Middle East and how we can approach the problems of Middle East through peaceful coexistence. But anyway, I've been involved with the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education since 1991, and then but around that time, my cooperation with BIHE was, random, and once in a while I would send a new article or translate a scientific article from English to Persian for Baha'i students because they didn't have access to a scholarly work and scholarly literature. And since 2003, I've been actively involved with BIHE in terms of teaching courses, consulting, and also in developing a platform, an online platform for online courses for BIHE. Now we have more than 50 academic scholars who teach on a regular basis through online delivery different courses at bachelor and master level programs for BIHE from outside. So now let's go back to give you a little bit of introduction about the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education, or BIHE. As you know, the Baha'i faith was originated in Iran, and since the beginning of the inception of the faith in Iran, it's been the subject of religious persecution and prejudices. And we don't have time to go through all the persecution, but basically since the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, the situation of Baha'is got much worse, and hundreds of Baha'is were executed, thousands were into prison or lost their jobs, and terminated from different organizations and government agencies. They did not, their pensions were cut, and but above all, for the young Baha'is, they were denied higher education. They said that, if you want to basically enter into higher education or academic institutions of higher learning, you have to deny your faith. And then, of course, this was not appropriate for the Baha'i community of Iran. And there were many other documents that were released or exposed by international organizations, through which we realized that the government of Iran had a plan to basically strangulate the Baha'i community of Iran through, through cultural means, by basically banning Baha'i students from going to universities, and by not allowing them to become educated. And therefore, as a result of this, they were expecting that the community, when it's young, is not educated, so it would gradually die out. So that was the idea. However, the Baha'i situation, the Baha'i community of Iran was very dynamic and active community, and they realized that they need to educate their young people, and they also needed to maintain the culture of the community, the educational level of the community. They knew that if the young is not educated, what happens is that the entire community would not survive. and would not be able to transfer its heritage to the next generation. So what they did was they established their own institution of higher learning. It started in a humble fashion, and by which a group of Baha'i university professors or scholars or people who had done research and some sort of academic activities, they got together and they said, okay, we establish courses for Baha'i students who were denied higher education. So they basically held classes in rooms, in basements of different Baha'i homes and Baha'i houses. And of course, the entire Baha'i community was behind this project. They knew that they had to support this in order for this enterprise to be successful. So they held classes on different subjects. And by subjects, I mean not Baha'i teachings or religious teachings, because the idea was not to establish a seminary. The idea was to establish a university, a place of learning about sciences. And so they offered different courses, from chemistry to physics to mathematics to language to writing, and to introduction to sociology, introduction to psychology. And to make this process, to make it, it's a long history. Basically, it took the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education about 10 years to form a systematic approach to higher education, and also forming programs of study. And then as I mentioned, by 2003, we added an online plan to this process, and we also went, the entire curriculum of the university went into a process of reform and renewal. Now, and then by now, BIHE has been able to achieve around 17 bachelor degree programs and 9 master level programs. And these are all in different fields of higher education, as I said, from social sciences, humanities, to biology and pharmacology, and these different disciplines. And of course, the government, the Islamic government, did not approve this process, and through the past, I should say, 27, 28 years, they have raided BIHE in different situations. They have arrested BIHE faculty and administrators. They have arrested BIHE students, and they have sent them to prison. The last raid was in 2011, that through which a number of Baha'i administrators, BIHE administrators and teachers were sentenced to long prisons, to 4 to 6 years of prison. A few of them were just released. As you can imagine, the 2011 to 2016 were the last one that were last group of faculty and administrators that were released. I mean, the sentences were ended and they were released from the prison. But through all, sure.
Dr. Sabet, I just want to insert here. I just want to insert here, everybody, about the instructors and faculty going to prison. Just rest assured, everybody, I would go to prison for your education. But besides that point, Dr. Sabet, I was hoping you would say a little bit more about. So obviously, the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education is not popular in Iran, amongst the Iranian government. Can you talk a bit more about why there's a need for this institute? Can't Baha'is just go to regular universities and major in whatever they want and get a degree and then work in whatever they want? Why do they have to have a specific Baha'i institute for higher education? If you could talk more about that.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you. I mentioned briefly that they were basically expecting Baha'i students to renounce their faith or simply lie to the government and move on with their studies. And even though I personally don't believe that they were ready to accept even that, but apparently in informal discussions they have mentioned to Baha'is that, okay, how about you deny your faith and then we allow you to continue your education. But basically this was not appropriate for the Baha'i community. First of all, as I said, the whole idea was to maintain the vitality and the vitality of the Baha'i community. And this was against the teachings of the Baha'i faith to renounce their faith. And in fact, truthworthiness and trustworthiness, these are some of the fundamental virtues that are announced by the Prophet, founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. And therefore, not only it was an immoral act for Baha'is to deny their faith and lie to the government, but also they considered this as a threat to the survival, to the subjective, to the moral, to the basically to the survival of the community. Because when you deny your faith and try to do things in hiding, and basically when you lose your integrity and dignity in order to achieve some material success in life, that was contrary to the way that these Baha'i students were trained and educated in their families. So for a variety of reasons, this was not acceptable to the Baha'i community. So it wasn't really pressure from anywhere to follow this route, but it was just an internal way of responding to this pressure from outside. So these students were not disappointed and dissatisfied with the results. They were really, I don't want to really say things that are so, I hope you don't consider this as some sort of boasting about the situation. It was, I've been the teacher of this institution for so many years, and I've seen this, I've experienced this in person, that none of the students were dissatisfied with this decision, and they were encouraged, and in fact they were really supportive of this decision. So basically this was the reason for deciding to create their own university. Even though this university was informal, even though it wasn't recognized by the government, even though they were not able to find a job in government agencies and organizations, they still valued this for two reasons. First of all, just to pursue knowledge and education was important for the community and for the Baha'i students in Iran, just for the sake of knowledge itself. Besides that, this gave them this degree, bachelor degree, let's say in computer science, from BIHE, allowed them to go to other countries and like coming to the United States and continue their education, higher education, and go into master and PhD programs. And so that happened. And the third reason was these students were able, some of them were able to find job in the private sector. And because the private sector did not, express the same animosity towards the Baha'i community. And in fact, they were welcoming students of BIHE because they had high performance on their jobs. So because of all these reasons, sure, yes.
From Christy, she was wondering why Baha'is were barred from specific degrees in public Iranian institutions. She was wondering, is it because there was an effort to diminish high earning potential and push Baha'is down to the socioeconomic ladder, or is there some other argument given for why Baha'is couldn't pursue certain degrees?
I think the idea is, yes, it is correct. They wanted Baha'i students not to have a higher education, not be able to earn a middle class income, and gradually go down both financially and intellectually. That was basically the reason.
Okay. You're probably going to talk about this one here in a minute, but Michaela has a good question as well. She's wondering if, for the Baha'is that receive a degree from the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education, she's wondering, does the Iranian government recognize the degree for those whom complete them, as in the workforce, or are the degrees recognized, by corporate organizations or non-government organizations? You kind of hinted at this already, but if you want to go in more detail on that.
Excellent question. Yes, excellent question. The degree, BIHE degrees are not recognized by the government or the Ministry of Education or Higher Education. But as I mentioned, in the private sector, some Baha'i students, Baha'i graduates, have been able to find a job. And even though, based on some reports, they have received less than the average or the income or salaries, but they have been happy for getting those jobs. And if you can see the PowerPoint, you see that as I mentioned, a number of BIHE students came to the United States and Europe, or basically outside Iran. And the number of Iranian students, and remember, this statistics belong to 2013, and of course some of them, some of the numbers have dramatically changed. But basically, before the revolution, the number of students in America, Iranian students in American universities were about 50,000, and you see some more statistics here about the gradual decrease of the number of the Iranian students in the United States. Here are some basic introduction about the Iran as a country, about the population which has increased, about the academic year and so on, which may not be, you can find all this information on somewhere else. Let's go to okay, here is one important factor about the university entrance examination, or it's called concours. That is, it is a very competitive examination, and usually more than 1 million students sit for the examination. And when I was in Iran, perhaps 1/5 of the participants were able to pass the exam. The situation has changed now, and and more students can pass this hard entrance examination. However, the point about this and BIHE is that majority of BIHE students intentionally would participate in this national exam. And a number of them would pass the exam with high records, with high grades, with high marks. And just in order to prove that they are able and ready to go to higher education. And when they were dismissed, when then after the passing the exam, they would go to the university to register. They would say that you are not able to register because you are a Baha'i, and sometimes with some other excuses. But basically, they would try to dismiss them or dismiss their complaints. And but the point is that majority of these BIHE students were able to pass this entrance exam. Okay, there are some general information about the number of Baha'is in Iran, which is about 350,000. And the Baha'i faith is the largest non-Muslim religious minority in that country. As I mentioned, BIHE was founded in 1987. And of course, the criteria for entering into BIHE was originally very hard. In other words, first of all, they had to pass the high school. They needed to get the high school diploma, and then there was an entrance examination, like the general concours for general universities. And sometimes they use, if they pass the general exam for the university system, BIHE would accept that to admit students. Approximately around 1,000 applicants per year try to enter into BIHE, and between 400 to 450 were admitted. And so that's the number of, the situation is now changed. In order to basically facilitate all Baha'i graduates of with high school diploma, they removed the entrance examination, and instead of that, those who were qualified by other means, let's say if they had the high mark in high school diploma, or they had participated in general exam concours and received a high degree, a high grade. So those students are directly admitted into BIHE programs. Those who are less qualified in terms of their application and the studies and the grade and all that, they are allowed to enter into a 2-year general education program. 2-year general education program. During these 2 years, they take courses in general courses in foreign language, which is basically English, and then basic science courses like physics and chemistry, math, and writing, and some other. General education
Dr. Sabet, I have a quick question. She was wondering what the 350,000 number referred to, if that was like the total population of Baha'is in Iran, or if that was perhaps the population at BIHE.
No. That was the population of Baha'is in Iran.
Perfect, thank you. So 2 years of general courses, and is it 2 years of specialization courses is kind of like a bachelor's in America?
Almost, yes. But those who were not qualified in the initial application, they had to do well, as I said, in these general courses in order to be able to continue. So this was one way of maintaining the standards, academic standards, while admitting all high school graduates. So this was the situation at this point. Here, as you see, I mentioned this, there are associate degrees, 2-year program for 70 semester credits. They are in accounting, civil construction, computer technology, preschool education, plant production technology. There is one piece is missing here, and that is music. But remember, this associate degree is different from that 2-year general education that I mentioned. This is a degree that some people come initially for the associate degree, and that's all. They go through the process and get their degree. But the 2-year general courses are like some sort of probationary. In other words, they had to do well in those courses in order to be able to move on to the next degree. And then there are bachelor degrees. It's very similar to bachelor degree in the United States, and these are some of the degree programs such as accounting, applied chemistry, architecture, biology, business administration, computer engineering, mathematics, computer science, law, music, Persian literature and Iranian culture, psychology, pharmaceutical sciences, sociology, structural engineering, transportation engineering, water and waste engineering. And then there are master programs in business administration, curriculum development, construction management, educational psychology, general psychology, neuroscience, public health, sociology, software engineering, and structural engineering. And there are 32.
Ryan has a quick question.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, didn't. Brian had a quick question for you. He's wondering if only those who don't pass that exam have to do really well or have to do really good to move on. Kind of what happens to those who don't pass the exam?
I guess, as I said, one thing that BIHE wanted to maintain was they didn't want to be just a charity program, that, okay, now these Baha'i students are not going to the university. They are not allowed to continue in regular institutions of higher learning. Let them, involved in this process. Let them be happy with this. This is not the idea. The idea is that this is a sound and solid educational foundation, this BIHE, and they need to do hard work in order to pass these courses and graduate from these programs. And as I said in the beginning,
I love that you said that. Thank you.
You're welcome. The initial idea was, of course, as I mentioned, around 1,000 high school students or high school graduates would apply, and around 400 would be accepted. And then later, BIHE decided, okay, let's give a chance to everybody, and they removed the entrance examination. And then now, let's say if 1,000 want to come to BIHE, they can. But there is a condition. They say, okay, we offer you 2 years of general courses, and you have to maintain, acceptable grade point average here in order to be able to continue. And of course, in the process, in the process, they provide them with all sorts of support, help, in order to make them, available all the resources to them and make them progress in this process. So this is I think this is not an ideal situation, of course, but this is an attempt to allow to have open system and at the same time maintain higher standards. One thing that shows clearly the highest standards of BIHE is the fact that a number of BIHE graduates who came to the United States and Canada, even though they didn't have, official transcripts from the government, and even US universities or Canadian universities or these agencies that review and recognize international degrees, none of them had heard anything about BIHE. And this process started after 2000, let's say. And in the past 15, 16 years, BIHE, from almost non-existence in the West or outside Iran, has reached to a point that now more than this, on this slide you see it says over 70 colleges and universities around the world accept BIHE studies, but this is completely changed. Now it's more than 90 colleges and universities. And we are talking about major universities in the United States and Canada. For instance, Harvard, MIT, Berkeley, McGill in Canada, University of Toronto, University of Ottawa. And this just as a result of, as I said, with all these obstacles, these students have been able to prove that they are worthy of higher education. And basically started with, I guess, about 5 or 6 students that were accepted in a Canadian university for a master's degree in engineering, if I'm correct, and some in psychology and counseling. And they did so well by the end of their master program that when they wanted to leave, because some of them had promised BIHE to come back and help the institution. So they were offered a scholarship to stay on and continue with their PhDs, purely based on their performance.
Dr. Sabet? Okay, so
yes.
A couple more questions here. So Shauna, you can tell these are inquisitive students here because they're putting themselves into the shoes of these Baha'is and wondering about, the different processes these students have to go through. So Shauna's wondering about the entrance exam into BIHE. She's wondering, can you retake the exam at a later date, or is this a one-time entry, you pass it or you fail it, and that determines your future of BIHE?
As I said, at this point, there is no entrance exam. They removed the requirement for entrance exam. Now, every Baha'i student with a high school diploma can enter into BIHE. But those who are less qualified, they have to go through a process, as I said, the 2 years taking courses, general courses, and if they perform well in those general education courses, then they can go on to the next specialized courses and the remaining years to get their bachelor degree. Did I clear this issue?
I think,
or?
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And looks like you have like a sample transcript here.
Yes, this is just a sample transcript, and I don't know if you can read it, but basically it's it's very much similar to an American transcript, because in general higher education in Iran, modern higher education in Iran was initially was after the French model, but later in the past 50, 60 years, it was after the American higher education model. So along those lines, BIHE, the courses, semester, I mean, the entire system was very much similar to American model. So any other question?
I love that you put this transcript here, because I think a lot of what the students look at is their transcripts, because they're pursuing a certain degree path, and so they can kind of see the similarities here. So I just love that. Let's see. Christy's wondering, how is BIHE funded? Is it funded totally, completely on tuition, or because usually they're used to students are used to state-funded colleges like Everett, where we are, but I imagine BIHE doesn't get government funding of any sort.
Excellent question. Students are required to pay a minimal tuition. It's not really, an expensive activity, education. Roughly speaking, maybe for each semester, maybe they are asked to pay, let's say, $50 for basic, buying certain things and so on. But of course, the expenses of BIHE are much more than that. I mean, much higher, and that is basically provided by the cooperation and contributions of the entire Baha'i community of Iran. So the whole idea is that even though there is a minimal tuition, but even if a student cannot pay even that amount, that doesn't prevent him or her from continuing his or her education. So basically, I would say it's a free education, free tuition, and the expenses are paid by the Baha'i community of Iran.
That's phenomenal. What about so I'm just trying to set up a compare and contrast with what our students here know about colleges and universities. Are there student clubs and activities at BIHE for I mean, obviously it's mostly done online, right? Where the students are going to listen to their instructor via conferences and submit their homework online. Are there clubs and whatnot the students can join?
No, I mean they have informal meetings, of course, and as I mentioned, the best way to describe the current educational model or educational delivery is a hybrid. Basically, it's a combination of online and face-to-face classes. But face-to-face classes are also, it's not like here. It's because, as I said, there is no classroom. There is no, and students are from all over the country. And it's very difficult to maintain classes in different cities, in different towns or villages. So what happens is that to attend those face-to-face classes, students come to Tehran, the capital city, and go through, let's say, 1 week of intensive face-to-face classes, and then leave and go back to their cities and continue their education through online delivery. And then let's say let's maybe 2 intensive sessions throughout a semester for face-to-face classes, And then if there are examinations, they would come back to Tehran, to the capital city, and you know, for the administration of the exam. So this is the case of the face-to-face. It's not like regular, you know, weekly classes. You know, they have, as I said, one, or depending on the nature of the program, they have face-to-face sessions for about a week or a few days. When I say intensive, I mean they start classes from 8 a.m. to maybe 6 p.m. for 5 days. And then they receive all the instruction, all the necessary materials, and then go back to their own towns and cities and villages, and then continue. But there are courses that are offered, as I mentioned, from outside, from here, from Canada, from Australia, from Europe. Those courses are fully online. You know, I teach courses and for bachelor degree and master degree programs, and those are fully online. And so as I said, it's a hybrid situation.
Okay, so this question is actually from Sabina, and I think we can relate this to what you're talking about with the hybrid situation, where students will be in a class intensive for 8 to 5 or all for a week long potentially. Sabina's wondering if you could talk about the danger of being arrested. I mean, if you're going to be meeting, isn't that kind of like the perfect opportunity for the government? Like, oh look, the Baha'is are all in one place. Is there that potential?
Yes, definitely. There is. It's a risky situation, definitely, and they have accepted this risk, both students and the faculty, and of course, we have to say that with the change of, you have to become more familiar with Iranian political structure and situation and so on. There are, when a moderate, so quote unquote, a moderate president is elected, for instance, during the time of Khatami, President Khatami, then Baha'is had, I should say, a little bit more freedom. I mean, when I say, I should say BIHE. Even though around the second term of his presidency, there was one raid. But I would say during his first term of presidency, there was more freedom for BIHE to operate. So you have to admit that fact. But let's say during the succeeding presidency, of course, the situation got worse. And as I said, a large number of faculty and administrators were arrested in 2011, and they were sentenced to long prison terms. Just imagine, because you are teaching chemistry or you are teaching English literature, you have to go to prison for 5 years. And but they went and came out, and yeah, the threat is always there.
Thank you, Doctor. So my students, other questions anybody has? Christy, I know you asked about study abroad opportunities. I know we talked to Dr. Sabet, I know you talked about that a little bit earlier about BIHE students, studying at the universities and then being asked to stay and do their PhD work because they were so good. Here's a question from Christy. This is a good question. What is the U.S., America's role in helping imprison Baha'i teachers? Or does America even have a role? Or are we staying out of it, so to speak, politically?
So far, the U.S. has been very helpful. When I say the U.S., I mean the government, the Congress, the people, and the institutions of higher learning. They have been very supportive. There were 2 campaigns. One was education under fire, and the other one was education is not a crime. Both campaigns, if you go online, you see bunch of materials on these two educational campaigns. One of them is still continuing through artistic expressions. They painted the murals on the different buildings all over the world about the right to education. Anyway, so throughout these processes, I've been involved in both campaigns, and as I said, the support and the help from American people and agencies and organizations, whether academic or governmental, have been very positive, and perhaps I would say without any hesitation that the United States has been really instrumental in changing the situation of BIHE, because the students came here, because the students were able to continue their education here, and because of the constant condemnation of the persecution of Baha'is in general and BIHE in particular by the US administration and the US Congress. So overall, I should say American people and academic institutions and governmental institutions, as well as NGOs, have done pretty well, and I guess the best thing is just to continue that.
Really great question and really great answer. I have a question, actually. I'm curious. So, Doctor, you teach BIHE students. You are faculty at BIHE. Do you encounter, like, as the students are reaching the end of their degree, do you ever encounter what we call senioritis? Kind of, I'm not sure if you've heard the term senioritis, where they're just winding down, they're exhausted, they're burnt out from all their studies, and they just kind of maybe decline in their abilities, so to speak, performance. Or is that just like a more phenomenon?
I didn't hear the last part of your comments.
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering, like, do BIHE students get senioritis? Does their performance decline as they progress into their degree, or is that a Western phenomenon that we see among Western students, or not all Western students, to be fair, but it does tend to be a stereotypical concept?
I guess it's a typical concept, and I've seen all sorts of similar reactions and expressions from BIHE students. But I should say one thing. When you are under severe pressure from outside, I guess that creates a new mentality. It's not that they are unique. I'm sure if US students come under the same situation, would respond the same way. In other words, this is the nature of the persecution, the nature of suffering that creates a new mentality. And the new mentality, I mean, suffering and persecution can break people, no doubt. But at the same time, those who can, move on and resist this pressure, that resistance gives them a sense of satisfaction and moral, higher moral agency. So I've seen some BIHE students expressing intense disappointments at times because of the all sorts of pressure from outside, from lack of success in a material sense, in a social sense, not being able to continue their education, experiencing financial difficulties, having all sorts of difficulties at home, having a father in prison because he was a Baha'i, he was an active Baha'i. So because of sometimes, all these things reach a boiling degree, and you can see that in the way that students experience their higher education. It happens several times for me that the students wrote me that, for instance, I could not send my assignment because of my father or mother was arrested. So because I have to admit these are difficult situations, and obviously BIH students, like any other young students in anywhere in the world, would feel pain. But overall, I should say their morale is strong, and they have developed a sense of something that I call constructive resilience. That, in other words, their resilience is made because they are not, because of the Baha'i teachings, they are not instructed to turn into violence or even into passive resistance, which is a very positive. I'm not trying to belittle passive resistance. A lot of major social changes like the civil rights movement in the United States were successful because of the passive resistance. But what they do, the response, BIHE is something that is neither violent nor passive resistance, and yet they are not surrendering to the will of the government or the regime or the oppression. They say we continue our education, and we resist this process. We are not converting to, we are not renouncing our own faith, and yet our response is by educating ourselves and by contributing to the Iranian society, not just the Baha'i community. A lot of these students, you asked about that, a lot of them get together and on just individual initiative and establish some sort of informal project of literacy, or if there is a natural disaster, they go and help people of, let's say, earthquake and so on. This way they come together, they enjoy each other, and at the same time achieve a humanitarian project as well.
Thank you, Dr. Sabet. That constructive resilience, that was an amazing point that you made. Absolutely love that. We got a few more questions coming in from students, but I'm actually going to pose this one because it is an interesting question. So BIHE is, for all intents and purposes, it is a religious institution to a certain extent. It's a religious academic institution. In America, we have state schools, but we also have a lot of private universities that are also religious, like Protestant. I think predominantly you got some Catholic and you got some Protestant. And for these Catholic and Protestant universities, they oftentimes require their students to like go to mass or go to service at certain times of the day, or the class might begin in a prayer, or the students might be required to have some kind of religious slant in their papers. This BIHE, is it, despite the fact that it's a Baha'i academic institution, does it completely set aside any religious perspective objective or adherence or requirement, or is there some in the material or in the requirements?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I try to answer. It's a multifaceted question, and my answer should address all these different dimensions of this question. First of all, BIHE is not really, because of its unique situation, okay, is not really similar to any other institution in the world, because as I said, it's because it's something that is being shaped through outside oppression, outside persecution, and therefore it has not found a solid form or shape. It is more like a liquid that moves on and tries to find a shape, its own shape, based on how the external pressure is trying to exert some pressure. So because of all these situations, it's very difficult to compare it to any other institution. In terms of having mass or all those are really individual choices. In other words, let's say, in other words, BIHE is not interested, nor does have the ability to provide those services. So therefore, all those quote-unquote religious services with Baha'i orientation are done, through the families and individual choices and so on. So in other words, I don't think BIHE conducts a religious service for BIHE students. So that's another part of this responding to this question. In terms of the content of the materials, there are, I should say, there is no course or program under the category of Baha'i studies, for instance. There is no such program. And then, let's say, math courses are like any other math courses in the world, or sociology courses or psychology courses. There is an interesting point here I would like to mention. Applied sciences and physical and natural sciences, by their nature, cannot have a religious orientation, obviously. Even though in some totalitarian systems, like in Nazi Germany, they even try to impose certain agenda on teachings of biology. But anyway, these courses are really free of any religious idea or value or any philosophical. These are sciences and they deal with facts. So that's about those courses. However, in social sciences, let's say in psychology and in sociology, or if a course is offered in philosophy, these are the courses that leave it open for the discussion of religion. Interestingly, these courses are taught based on the current, when I say these courses, I mean, let's say, Psychology 101. Or in fact, there is a program in general psychology, a bachelor degree program. Almost 99% of these courses are based on the latest research and findings in the field of psychology. In other words, there has not been any attempt to give or change the nature of this, the content of these courses to make them Baha'i oriented. In other words, incorporate secular psychology with the spiritual psychology of the Baha'i faith, for instance. That has not been the case. However, there are, in bachelor program, there are courses that are called, let's say, 20 credit hours, 20 or 21 to around that number of credit hours. These courses are called core curriculum. Core curriculum. I don't know if you are familiar with the concept of core curriculum. It's a classical approach to higher education, particularly in liberal arts tradition. And some major American universities offer core curriculum. Core curriculum are not, let me say this, are not general education courses like math and English and all that. The idea of core curriculum is to establish a solid foundation for all students of all, with disregard of their degrees or majors. So they all become familiar with some fundamentals of human civilization and also establish a foundation for interdisciplinary dialogue. Let's say the whole idea of core curriculum was developed when some Western universities realized that their graduates, someone who's graduated from philosophy or music, cannot communicate with someone who's graduating with a degree in biology or computer sciences. And I said, cannot dialogue. In other words, I mean, they can talk to each other, but they don't have any shared common understanding about the nature of reality, about human existence, about the purpose of life, about ethics, about history, about civilization, and so on. So the whole idea was that how about we offer some core courses that provide that foundation. So core curriculum courses in BIHE are established based on that tradition. In other words, to establish a liberal arts foundation for all students, whether they are pursuing a degree in pharmacy or in sociology. In core courses, it's not all of them. For instance, there is a core curriculum course which is called epistemology, or the theory of knowledge. Epistemology or the theory of knowledge is a course that are perhaps taught in many American universities. In fact, some high school diplomas that are advanced high school diplomas they also offer a course in theory of knowledge. Anyway, so BIHE has a course in theory of knowledge. In this course, the whole idea is about what is the nature of knowledge and how knowledge is created and how knowledge is transferred from one generation to the next. So these are the fundamental. And when I say knowledge, I mean knowledge in its broadest sense. Knowledge that involves and incorporates all the majors, all the sciences, all the disciplines, philosophical knowledge, scientific knowledge, religious knowledge, all that. Knowledge based on rationality, knowledge based on empirical observation, and knowledge based on faith. So in those courses, because of the nature of the course, there are references to Baha'i concept of, let's say, knowledge. What is the nature of knowledge and how we acquire knowledge? So this is the only, some of these courses, not all of them, some of these courses, make references, not more than other. For instance, in this epistemology, they study, the ancient philosophy, modern philosophy, and then political philosophy in regard to the concept of knowledge. And then, of course, a reference to the knowledge from a religious source. And then in that context, they study some references that are made in the Baha'i writings, as well as Christianity and Islam and other religious traditions. It was a lengthy response, but
no, that was a perfect response, and I did give you a very multifaceted question, which, yes, you're absolutely right, does require a multifaceted answer, which I thought was absolutely fascinating, and I can tell the students thought it was interesting too. I do want to make the point that Catholic and Protestant universities, as you know, here in the U.S., are fully accredited, even if they have that religious slant. But it is really interesting that BIHE is able to keep the religion component to a minimum, comparable to a lot of state universities. So
yeah.
I've stolen enough questions. I should get to the students' questions. So Christy's wondering what the demographics are of BIHE grads. Like maybe, I know that BIHE does take non-Baha'is as well. I think you mentioned that earlier. And what about gender? Are they also, is it mostly Iranians, or are there other nationalities?
No, at this point, I mean, BIHE in its, philosophy and basically has declared that it's open to all people, and I mean to all students with diverse cultural and religious background. And BIHE ideally is ready to accept non-Baha'i students, but the situation does not allow that. Under those circumstances, if a non-Baha'i comes and register in BIHE, and if the government finds out, that would be really a troubling situation for that students. So in order to avoid that situation at this point, the student body is limited to Baha'i Iranian students. And there are no students from other countries. It's just Iranian Baha'i students.
How about gender?
Oh, interesting. I mean, it's an excellent question. I don't have the exact numbers, but for sure, the number of female students are much higher than male. I would say, roughly speaking, 60 to 40.
That's a huge difference. Any ideas why that might be?
One, I mean, it's a very interesting. I mean, I have to say that this is a trend that exists in institutions of higher learning in Iran as a norm. In other words, it's not just BIHE. Even in government universities, the number of girls are more than boys. Now, why this is the situation? It's a very fascinating issue, and I briefly discuss it here. First of all, you have to realize that women have played a significant role in resisting the oppression and pressure that were, received by the, because of the nature of theocracy that was based on, basically the nature of the theocracy considered men superior to women. And they asked women to cover themselves, to go under the hijab, and basically remain at home and busy themselves with household duties. But Iranian women in general have resisted this, and in different ways, and in fact, sometimes in a really painful and yet significant and glorious way, which is really credit to Iranian women. All the credit goes to them. And so in terms of the gender, the same norm, the same pattern exists in BIHE. But in BIHE, the case is, in addition to general interest of women to become educated. Okay, there is, like, I don't know how to explain it. It is like it's chic to be educated. Let's put it this way. It's cool to be educated. So that's perhaps that is one reason. The other reason is a social, when you become educated, it's a source of pride and social prestige that doesn't come just by money. Okay, and then I'm talking about the mentality, and then the other issue is in terms of BIHE, because of the, as I said, external pressure and an attempt to economic strangulation of the Baha'i community. Men, a larger number of men have gone to work to support the families. And that trend obviously shows itself in the number of people who attend come to BIHE. So I guess I would say, even though women also work, BIHE students also work, but the female students. But the number of people who are more involved with the work and financial situation are more male than female. And that, of course, has allowed more opportunity to women to continue their higher education. But as I said, this is not really the main factor, the financial situation. The main factor is that desire to become educated, and because they have learned through education, they would equip themselves with the necessary tools to resist external pressure, and somehow manage their own lives without interferences, without constant interferences. When you are not educated, and then of course you lose everything. It is not that, in other words, becoming educated make them available to grab some of their basic human rights that are under normal circumstances should be, available to all human beings, to all citizens of the country. But because that is not the case, they have learned that, okay, let's get educated so that we can become somebody. I hope this somehow explains. I mean, this requires really an intensive study of the role of women in Iranian society after the Islamic Revolution. So it's a really a major topic, but this is just a brief, random explanation. I hope I did it properly.
I think that was very interesting and perfect. I love how you emphasize education as a human right, and especially education being a new chic thing going on, a trend in Iran at the moment. It's kind of like education is the new black, to use that term that is very popular with the younger crowd. That would be a good marketing campaign for BIHE. Education is the new black. Okay, so that actually you kind of segued us almost the next question really well. Dania is wondering, how do parents feel about BIHE in terms of, like, their Baha'i children are trying to get an education? Maybe are the parents proud because they want their children to have an education, or are they fearful that their children might be exposed to arrest?
No, they are really strongly encourage them to get the education, to become educated. It's the Baha'i faith really elevates the station of education, and education has the highest priority in Baha'i teachings, and education is viewed as the only and main instrument for individual and social change. So, they are really encouraging their children to continue their education and become educated. Yeah, they are fully supportive.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm just going to do a last call for questions. I know Baha'is don't drink alcohol, but yeah, we drink education instead. So last call for questions. So this is such an interesting topic. I really do think this is a topic that should be the forefront of newspapers today, because it is it's such an issue with human rights, and a very interesting topic. So for my students, if you have any questions, I'm just going to give you 1 more minute to post those. I do want to make the point that Dr. Sabet is on Eastern time, and so it's almost 10:30 where he's at, and so we really want to thank him for staying up late for us. Dr. Sabet, I'm curious. I want to say, I know it's like past 10:30 in your time zone, so we'll let you go, but again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.